welcome to our episode review of Dragon Quest. As you might have been able to tell, I am not brushing bones, I am Final Draft.
Oh god, no.
Ah, yes, Crescendo, yes. And this week we've got another reviewer with us who usually isn't on the program, Nash.
Jag stoppar katter I påsar.
No, Nash, we're not doing this in Swedish, we're doing this in English.
Oh, okay.
Nash is our site editor. He's the guy who helps make our website work, and he makes sure that all of our posts and all of our annotations are in order. So, why don't you say hi to the crowd, Nash?
Hey everyone. Yeah, I'm just the guy who does the annotations that you will see popping up if you watch the video, and I make all the shiny episode posts and stuff like that.
They're very, very shiny. Very shiny indeed. Okay, so let's get to the episode at hand, Dragon Quest. And I kind of thought that this episode was really a character study. And I don't know what you guys thought, but I felt like this was really an episode where each of the characters had a bit of development. Obviously Spike, but also all the other side characters as well.
Yeah, there was a lot of character development. There was some continuity and things that were nice to see that they're keeping with the lessons they've learned before and not just restarting every episode.
I mean, to start with, we have Fluttershy being actually a little bit more assertive than normal, saying how she doesn't want to go to the Great Dragon Migration with Rainbow Dash because she's afraid of dragons still. And then she literally barges her out of the way and actually stands on her before she dashes to the window and makes us think where she's about to break through and then opens it slowly. That made me giggle.
Well, and she even leaves her cutie mark fly around Rainbow Dash's head. No, yeah, I thought it was kind of interesting. This isn't the first time we've seen Fluttershy not want to leave her home and have to be forced out of it one way or another. And in the end, of course, she deftly sneaks out the back window, but I got a real kick out of that too.
She was really putting up a fight there. And I guess the final insult, she made Rainbow Dash see more butterflies.
Exactly. Well, and another character voiced by Andrea Libben that we saw, at least towards the beginning of the episode, was Pinkie Pie.
Yeah.
Now, sadly, we only see a little bit of Pinkie Pie this episode, but we see she's cowering from the dragons.
And apparently she's also afraid of dragons. She thinks they're super scary.
Maybe it's just Andrea that's afraid of dragons.
Well, it seems odd given, the episode Dragonshy, where she just goes marching into a dragon cave dressed in everything.
Maybe it's just back then she was oblivious.
Shouldn't she be giggling at the ghostly, so to speak?
Well, you'd think so, but hey, it's Pinkie Pie. Physics don't make sense. Why should continuity? Come on.
Well, in Luna Eclipse, we found out she was just pretending to be scared, and she wasn't actually scared. But this time, she seems to actually be scared.
Well, I think maybe her misuse of the binoculars had something to do with that.
Well, wouldn't they seem further away, then she'd be less scared because they are so far away.
Again, this is Pinkie Pie physics we're talking about.
Yeah.
We never know how that girl works.
Does not compute.
Okay, so another character who I know, Nash, you are quite fond of that had a major role in this episode, a little more major than Pinkie or Fluttershy, was Twilight Sparkle.
Indeed, best pony.
Best pony indeed, this is known.
Silly Giraffe, that's not how you say Rainbow Dash.
Silly Crescendo, that's not how you say Twilight Sparkle. Nash, back me up on this.
Indeed, this is known. It is established.
So the best pony actually had a bit of character development herself this episode. She kind of revealed her own ignorance of dragons in a sense, which was kind of unusual. Most of the time when Twilight doesn't know something, she frantically tries to search for an answer to it, which, well, I suppose she did that this episode as well. But then in this episode, she couldn't come to a conclusion. She couldn't figure out anything about dragons from her entire library of books. And I thought it was really cool that the writers had her then say, you know what, Spike, I haven't been able to help you.
Reaching back to Dragonshy once more, Twilight outright states that dragons aren't usually seen in Equestria. So if they're not seen there, how can they really know much about them?
I thought it was interesting that she was admitting that she was unable to find any information about them.
I do love the fact that Twilight is basically going to any length, going through her entire library, staying up all night, just to help Spike feel a little better. That is actually really heartwarming.
Aw.
It doesn't really take much convincing to get Twilight to do late night studying. It's something she enjoys doing, and it's not like you have to force her.
Yeah, she didn't seem all that exhausted after all those hours of research. When the other ponies show up and say, hey, you want to go to breakfast? She just kind of perks up right away.
Maybe they were going to get some coffee.
And we get to see that she can go through books really fast. She's like just flipping through them and it's like, oh, nothing here.
I gotta go back to what Crescendo said a moment ago, though. If they were gonna go and get some coffee, I just shake at the thought of Pinkie Pie caffeinated. That just scares the hell out of me.
Oh dear.
Well, I liked how level-headed Twilight was, and she realized, okay, I can't help Spike, so I have to support him when he started trying to figure this out himself, instead of being overprotective like the others were like, no, you can't go.
I mean, they may be overprotective, as you say, but it goes to show that while they still consider him a baby dragon, they care an awful lot about him. They really don't want him to get hurt.
Well, I think also, though, that Twilight, Rainbow Dash, and Rarity kind of act like helicopter parents. They hover behind while he's on this quest in Rarity's contrived costume. So in a sense, they were a bit overprotective.
Well, considering they don't know much about dragons, and every time they've encountered dragons, they've been pretty negative experiences, I can understand that they're being sort of hesitant to let Spike go off on his own and hang around a bunch of dragons. As they went disguised, they had the option to not interfere. It wasn't necessary, but they still could do that if they found it was needed.
Well, Nash, when we were talking about this earlier, you pointed out that Twilight uses some new spells in this episode.
Yeah, she has the spell where she makes the red carpet and the confetti vanish, and I don't think we've seen that before, at least not that I recall, that she can just make things disappear.
I mean, there is the chance that she could have just teleported it somewhere, but that does seem highly unlikely. I feel sorry for, if it is a teleportation spell, the unlucky pony that ends up with a roll of red carpet and confetti just randomly appear on them.
Well, it may be on that list of spells from Season 1 where she displays her growing magic on Spike by giving him a mustache. I don't think I saw it there, but it might have been there.
I must ask you a question about that, though. I don't think he listed off the entire list.
Well, I guess we'll have to shave that thought for later.
Oh dear. But, I mean, it's still a new spell as far as we're concerned, because we haven't seen it before.
Sure. Well, and she also does her VoIPing thing a little more successfully this episode.
Yeah, she does a mass teleport, and if you think back to Ticketmaster when she teleports herself and Spike ends up all singed. Then we saw in Secret of My Excess, where she teleports Spike repeatedly and he doesn't get singed, and this time she's teleporting all four of them, and nobody gets singed, and it works out pretty well.
It's because her mana pool was full this time.
Oh, good lord.
She leveled up her teleport spell.
Well, I mean, you could tell, though, yeah, she had to try several times to get it to work. I thought that was kind of interesting. That was a little detail that didn't have to be in there, but you can tell that the animators were the ones who put that in there. So I was impressed by that. I thought that that was a little touch that added a bit of character to Twilight for the episode.
Oh, definitely. Because every good character has to have a flaw. It just goes to show that Twilight's magic isn't perfect. As we already know, as like the failsafe spell from Season 2, Episode 1.
One thing that was interesting about her spells were the spells she didn't use. I mean, during the dragon contests between Spike and the teenage brat dragons, Twilight never used her magic to help or assist him in any way. I thought that was kind of an interesting choice.
Well, maybe they wanted Spike to find out, like, stand on his own and find out how people will treat him as he is, and not try to boost him too much.
Besides, it is also possible that Spike would have known that magic is being used on him. After all, he pretty much is Twilight's guinea pig.
True enough, but I also think that it would have been all too easy for the writers of this episode to have that be how it played out, where Twilight helped his fire grow hotter or gave him some sort of impossible extra strength or whatever. Almost in the way that she did for Fluttershy during the fashion show in Season 1. And so I thought it was good that they decided not to have that stereotypical plotline occur in this episode.
Well, Spike has to see how other dragons treat him based on the way he is, and if they would assist him, then they would undermine that, and he wouldn't learn how other dragons perceive him.
Well, another major character in this episode was Rainbow Dash, who I know that some members of this review panel like or think is best.
Who could that be?
I have no idea.
I wonder who.
Well, so, Crescendo, what did you think of Rainbow Dash in this episode? What did you like about Rainbow Dash this episode?
I particularly liked how she reacted to Spike, especially with how she was feeling towards him. Like, it just shows she cares for him in this episode. I mean, we've not had much interaction between Rainbow and Spike in the past, really, except for, like, the occasional writing of her letters. Especially when we see in... Which episode was it now? The one where Rainbow Dash just says, "Oh, you can write the letter, Spike." It was Read It and Weep.
During the mysterious Ne'er-do-well, Spike plays Ghostwriter for Rainbow Dash, so they had that interaction, but it wasn't really a character interaction so much as an interaction of convenience.
Yeah, so we do get a nice interaction between her and Spike this episode. It hits you right in the heart when you see Twilight, Rainbow's, and Rarity's faces when they're under the dragon costume, when Spike says, "I might just stay here forever."
Forever?
Well, it's also that Rainbow Dash was being rather mean to Spike in the beginning of the episode.
Even before that, she was being mean to Fluttershy, really.
Yeah, she was kind of back to being mean. Rainbow Dash has gotten a lot of criticism for her portrayal in the episodes in Season 2. Like, people think she's being mean and stuff, and she was redeeming herself with, like, reading Rainbow. Well... Oh, no, it's not reading Rainbow.
Let's just call it that.
Well, she redeemed herself a bit with Read It and Weep, but now she's back to being kind of mean again.
Well, she was being aggressive and pushy as usual, but she was showing a lot of loyalty to Spike. I thought it was kind of interesting how she was being really aggressive when she was trying to help Spike, when they were flying off to raid the Phoenix Nest, and she's desperately trying to fly that whole costume full of the three ponies towards them, and we've got to get there, even to the point of almost falling into the pit of lava. So that showed to me that, sometimes her aggression can be a form of loyalty in itself.
Yeah, that bit was actually quite adorable.
Well, and this leads us to the third of the main three ponies of the episode, which is Rarity.
Well, what do you think? Am I the toast of the trench or what?
Yeah, Rarity. Her stealth skill is terrible.
She was a stealth fail. I liked her fashionable trench coat. I thought it was kind of funny when they were all dressed as if they were sitting in a World War II foxhole or in a World War I trench, and she shows up in this flamboyant, camouflage that just isn't camouflage.
Yeah, they have like the war paint and everything, and the military background music, and then Rarity comes in, rolls in the red carpet, and camouflage doesn't have to be drab.
I loved that.
The only place Rarity could be camouflaged is in her own boutique.
I don't know. I get the feeling she's fabulous enough to stick out there, too. But that's just me.
I don't think she can camouflage herself because she needs to stand out, and camouflage sort of defeats that.
Though, I do love how, especially towards the end of the episode where the dragons are facing off against the ponies and Spike, how Rarity stood up for Spike. She was willing to get her hooves dirty, as it were.
Fighting's not really my thing. I'm more into fashion. But I'll rip you to pieces if you touch one scale on his cute little head!
She was almost as offended as she was around Trixie, and I mean, that takes a lot.
And Trixie turned her hair green. Who does that to Rarity?
I don't know. I just don't know.
And unlike Rainbow Dash, Rarity is more of an embarrassing aunt that you run into at a family reunion. Like, grabs your cheeks, "Oh, look how much you've grown." And yeah, she was really making Spike feel bad with the whole My Little Spikey Wikey stuff. It wasn't intentional in the same way Rainbow Dash was just mocking him, but, well, basically she says he has his own style and he doesn't need to be like other dragons, which makes him feel even worse and even less of a dragon.
He's a loose cannon. He needs to be taken off the case.
Oh, good lord. Turn in your badge and your gun. Spike, you're off the case. I thought it was interesting that in this episode their dynamic wasn't as mutually affectionate as in other episodes. I mean, Spike usually starts swooning when Rarity gives him that kind of attention, and in this episode he didn't have any of it.
No, I think that goes to the fact that they're in danger and, well, saving his life comes first.
Well, I'm even saying before that, though, towards the beginning of the episode when they're hanging around Twilight's library and they're all talking to him and treating him like a baby, Rarity's patting him on the head saying, "Oh, my little Spikey Wikey." And usually, in most episodes, Spike starts getting hearts in the eyes and he starts swooning. This episode, he just didn't react to it.
No, I guess, though, it's because he felt like it was patronizing more this time.
I guess it could be seen as development, that he's sort of outgrowing that whole crush thing.
It would be interesting if that was the dynamic that the show was trying to go for. I kind of wanted to talk about the dynamic, though, between Twilight, Rainbow Dash, and Rarity when they were sneaking around in that quote-unquote costume.
Or maybe you're a pony in a dragon costume.
A pony in a dragon costume?
Yeah, hilarious.
And following Spike, I thought that it was interesting how they played their characters off of each other, as they're all trying to accomplish the same goals, but they all are doing it through their own personality styles.
Yeah, with Rainbow Dash being rather brash about it, and Twilight being the head of the operation, as it were.
Literally.
And with Rarity disguising herself in that dragon outfit.
Her fabulous dragon costume.
Which was, by some stroke of luck, similar to an actual dragon called Crackle.
Who's this weirdo?
I think he's Crackle's cousin.
Oh, that would explain it.
Well, let's move on then to the main character of the episode, the centerpiece of this character expose, Spike the Dragon. And it seemed that for this episode, really, Spike proved himself to be a pony.
Well, apparently.
That's what you get, though, when you're completely raised by ponies, and the only experience you have with other dragons is when, well, you're at Spike's age in this episode.
It's kind of like he's imprinted on the ponies. Like, he's spent his life among ponies, so he's behaving like a pony, and now he's even starting to call himself a pony.
Though, I think the most important aspect of Spike's character in this episode, he has a really nice apron.
It's a beautiful apron with a nice little heart on it.
I know, it's adorable.
And protect your feathers from stains.
Blueberry stains. I thought it was funny when he had his little cart and he was serving tea and biscuits. They're basically in a war zone, and there's Spike serving tea and cookies, and it just anyway, or with those muffins.
Have you had your biscuits today?
This episode seemed to be a very stereotypical peer pressure episode in a lot of ways. You know, it starts off with Spike coming to the realization he needed to go on a quest to discover who he was.
It was very much the coming-of-age episode for Pony.
In a sense, it seemed, though, that very quickly into the episode, it was Spike versus the stereotypical teenage gang.
Which did feel kind of flat, actually. It was almost like the bullies from the Cloudsdale episode with Rainbow Dash.
Yeah, they were really typically macho, generic teenagers that just king of the hill and like to destroy things just for no reason.
Yeah, it did feel like they were very two-dimensional. Those other dragons, they were really just, in every regard, typical teenagers. And I should clarify, I know that a lot of teenagers are listening to this podcast, but guys, those dragons are you.
I do have to say one touch I did like about the other dragons is the way the background music came in. It did make them feel like they lived up to their stereotype, but it was well done on William Anderson's part.
Absolutely. I love those guitar riffs.
Yeah, it's like some teenagers do, sadly. They just destroy things for fun. So they're just trying to steal the phoenix eggs, and I assumed they were going to eat them, but it turns out they just want to throw them on the ground and smash them. This is pointless, but, you know, some dragons just want to see the world burn.
I see what you did there.
Well, and so we throw Spike into the midst of these punks, and he goes through a classical identity crisis, you know, and he succumbs to peer pressure in some regards. I mean, he competes in each of their different games, and then he gets so far as to helping them raid the Phoenix Nest. And I have to just say, as an aside, I was really happy to see the Phoenixes be there in the episode at all. I loved Philomena's design, and I was really happy to see that they brought back more phoenixes as a species. They put a bird on this episode.
I do absolutely love the stark contrast between the brightly coloured phoenixes and the dark forest, like the greens and the browns. And I just have to say the phoenixes in this episode are beautiful, as were they in the other episode that involved a phoenix.
Absolutely, and I really think that's a good point that you brought up, that they had the bright phoenixes versus the dark background. I think that's a real credit to the animation crew over at DHX.
And we got to see phoenix eggs. They have this kind of flames going on the side, so they kind of look like fire as well.
Well, so getting back to Spike and his interaction with the other dragons, he does go through a very standard character development arc. He first meets the other dragons, he tries to establish which dragons he should hang out with, he walks past all the older dragons. Then he has that opening confrontation where they call him Shrimp and Pee-wee, and he has to then prove himself by acting as part of the group, and so that kind of plays into themes of peer pressure. And then eventually he's put in that position where they're trying to steal the phoenix eggs, and he's been conditioned to that point through peer pressure to participate, and he throws the first stone in that scene.
Well, he tries to talk first and distract them by babbling instead, but it doesn't work. But then they're pushing him, like, take the stone and throw it, and he does it because he wants to fit in and be accepted.
I just thought of something interesting, actually. This is like Spike's version of the Grand Galloping Gala episode, with how he has this thing he really wants to go to, he eventually gets there, and finds out it's not all that it's cracked up to be.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, I agree. I can see that parallel as well.
Which is actually quite funny on account of how Spike was all, I told you guys you should have stuck with me, at the end of the Grand Galloping Gala episode.
Well, I think the difference, though, was that in the Grand Galloping Gala episode, the ponies had certain expectations going into the event about what it was going to be like. Rarity was going to find her Prince Charming, Twilight was going to hang out with the princess, etc., etc. And in this one, Spike was going to see what it was like to be a dragon. He didn't know what he was getting into, but he just rolled with it. And I think in the end, in both cases, they all have realized by the end of their respective episodes that it's about being yourself and it's about pursuing your own dreams regardless of expectations.
And they all learned a valuable lesson about friendship.
They sure did.
And it's kind of like you learn to appreciate what you have already.
Well, and I thought that he kind of summed that up nicely at the end of the episode when he described himself as a pony. He found that he could identify better with pony values than he could with dragon values, which then leads me to the question, are all dragons selfish, monster-like characters?
I do certainly hope not, because I would like to see another sweet and innocent dragon like Spike, but from what we've seen, most dragons do seem quite jerky.
Yeah, and this also begs the question, if Spike ran into other dragons that weren't as evil or mean to him, would he actually stay with them then?
I think that's an interesting question, because when he heads out on his quest, Twilight and Rarity and the rest of them kind of say, well, we're looking forward to seeing you when you get back, and he doesn't disagree with that statement. But then again, after their little dragon party, he seemed to have completely forgotten where he came from. And I don't know if that's a maturity thing, or if that's just part of wallowing in his dragonness, Maybe that's too much of actual dragon behavior rubbing off on him.
Yeah, and he got just a little bit accepted, and he was considering staying there forever. And if he found a place where he actually belonged with other dragons, then, judging from that, I would say that he's likely to stay then.
I think the implication of the episode, or at least of the conclusion of the episode, is that he realizes that his place is with the ponies because that's who he is. I think that the writers would have led it that direction one way or another anyway, but I do agree with that.
Well, this is not the first time he's come back. I mean, during All's Well That Ends Well, he also runs away and gorges on gems and ends up just laying there with a stomach full of gems. But he's considering not going back, but he does decide to go back eventually.
Though, to be fair, he was kind of forced back on account of being attacked by a dragon. And he was rescued by Twilight, which then taught him the valuable lesson that he should trust his friend and companion.
Yeah, it seems to be recurring that he encounters other dragons and they're mean to him or just attacking him, and then he goes back.
Well, so then maybe dragons are supposed to be monsters in this show, and that he's breaking that stereotype by being more of a, pony, by acting moral and being a good friend.
It just goes to show that you don't need to be a pony to be a pony.
awe.
Well, judging by Secret of My Excess, they do have a tendency to become monsters unless they actually avoid being greedy and they try to be nice and generous instead. And if they don't, they end up becoming monsters.
Well, but then again, at the end of that episode, Spike came to the realization himself of what he'd become, and he reverted. And so that implies that there can be a salvation of sorts out there after all.
Yeah, but you still have to make that choice. Put aside your greed and be nice. I got the impression from Secret of My Excess that the dragon's natural state is that greed, and they have to actively avoid it, not to end up there.
Now, I suppose it does depend on, how you're born, because if you're born into a family of greedy dragons, your natural response will be to inherit that greed, but then we see Spike, who is born to a pony. His natural response isn't to take upon the greediness until he gets the urge.
Well, it's still there. It's inherent in all dragons, is how I interpret it.
Yes, it's innate in all dragons, but again, is how you're brought up, I suppose.
Well, isn't the potential for selfish behavior innate in all sentient beings, or at least all of the characters in My Little Pony?
I suppose.
True enough. I mean, how we see in the previous episode somebody trying to sell a cherry to Fluttershy for 10 bits.
Well, I think that kind of selfishness is present in all of the characters. Maybe dragons just show it in a more exaggerated way.
Well, it does seem like it's more part of their nature, and that's why dragons are more likely to be evil or mean.
Well, so before we wrap up this episode review, I just wanted to touch on a few of the elements of the episode, just random bits that I thought were really fun. I really liked Spike's epic journey across the countryside, and I'm hoping that somebody makes a meme image of Philly Rarity leading the way or something, being dragged by her horn, But I thought it was kind of cool when he goes up the one side of the mountain and it's snow while he rides on the back of a goat. And then he goes down the other side and eventually he has this beard.
But it turns out to be a fake beard after all. That cracked me up. I do love the humor in this show.
That was a typical vagrant with his knapsack and his beard just going on his long journey.
Well, we got to see Cranky Doodle Donkey again.
Yeah.
No, he's lost his toupee that Pinkie gave him and gained the silly black one back.
Yeah, he didn't have the Stephen Magnet toupee anymore. That's disappointing.
Well, he must have given it back to Stephen Magnet.
It was too fabulous for him to handle.
Well, and getting back then also to the Phoenixes in the episode, I absolutely loved that flare that the Phoenix did as a defense mechanism against the dragons. I thought that was so cool, and with the rays, that is a wallpaper waiting to happen. It's just so cool.
They were teleporting the young ones away or something, they turned into fire and disappeared.
Phoenixes are badass. Well, and speaking of Phoenixes as well, we have a new Phoenix character who has been named Little Pee-wee.
So Spike himself has his own pet.
I wonder if we'll get to see more of Pee-wee in the future.
A pet has a pet. Is this a petception? I believe that's the technical term.
Spike's not a pet, he's an assistant.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And Pee-wee was one of the names that the other dragons called Spike, just to spite him. So it seems like an odd name for his pet.
I don't know, it seems kind of appropriate. He took that name that they gave him to set him apart from the other dragons, and he used it as an affectionate name for the bird. I actually liked that connection.
I guess he's turning the negative to a positive or something.
As the episode's coming to a close, we see a typical scene that's been used in shows in the past of an album of photos sprawling across a mantelpiece, I believe it is. Almost a timeline of Spike's life. And we see him as a baby just hatching out of the egg, moving on to Nightmare Night where he's in his outfit dressed as another dragon, and finally to the picture of the cider season episode, and then a picture that he's pasted himself onto. I think that's Spike's real-world photoshopping skills.
Yeah, he's gonna hover hand Rarity in that one.
Okay, so now that we've kind of gone over the entire episode in detail, I think it's time that we came up with our ratings for it. And I say we do a rating out of 5 punk teenage dragons. So, Crescendo, what did you give this episode?
I will have to rate this episode 4 teenage punk dragons out of 5, because overall it was a brilliant episode. It had great examples of the animation. The writing was pretty good, but it did fall flat a little on its predictability, but hey, it's a children's show, and it is still very good. The humour is always great in this show. It never ceases to amaze me, actually. So yeah, 4 out of 5.
And Nash, what did you think?
I'm going to give it 3.5 crackles. It was enjoyable, but it's not one of the best, like Lesson Zero, which I think is the best episode. It was definitely good, but I can't really rate it as high because, in comparison to some of the other episodes, it's not at that level, so...
Well, I think I'm going to have to rate it 3 teenage punk dragons plus 1 crackle costume. And the reason I go with the 4 out of 5 is because although it had really, really canned 2-dimensional teenage punk dragons in the episode, it had just enough of those little touches to push it over the 3.5 for me. I mean, the Phoenix flare maneuver, Spike's fake beard, the trench scene, Rarity's trench coat. I mean, those little things to me, they matter. And I think that they add to the fun of an episode. So I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. Well, that was our episode review of Dragon Quest. I'm Final Draft.
I'm Crescendo.
And I'm Nash.
And before we go, I'd just like to wish you all a very happy winter wrap-up this Monday.